Thank you for joining me here on the Early Bird Classroom. And I decided that we are going to do something just a little bit different. So, you know that we've been talking about our Bible stories, right? And so we've been talking about Old Testament stuff in case you didn't know. So there are two testaments to the Bible. One is Old Testament, and a testament is like I want to say something. I want to say something and it's going to be true. That's like a testament, okay? So there's Old Testament. I want to say something and it's going to be true, but it's going to be old. And then New Testament. I want to say something and it's going to be truth, but it's going to be newer. A new law kind of is the way that we think of it, actually, as a new law. So Old Testament, I'm going to proclaim something that is true. It's truth. So it's law, but it's old law. I'm going to proclaim something that's truth. New law. And that is really the way that it goes. Even though I made it very simple for you, that's the way that it goes. Old law, new law. We can get into it, and we are going to get into it because we're talking about the 10 Commandments. So I decided to stop here for a minute instead of going on to our next story. So, as you know, we've been talking about we've been reading from Reader's Digest Bible for Children. And sometimes we also have stories that come from the Children's Illustrated Bible, mostly because this Bible, it goes into more detail, and they both have just really unbelievable pictures in here. This one, the pictures in here, the Children's Illustrated Bible, it's illustrated. I don't think the pictures are as magnificent, but it does give us some really interesting other pictures. Like this shows us where they were crossing when they left Egypt. So when Pharaoh finally decided that he would let the Israelites go from Egypt, here's a little map of that, where they had to travel, that red line there, where they had to travel. And they were going back into, actually, the land of Canaan. They were going back into the land that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and then re-promised to Jacob. Remember in Jacob's dream? So we were kind of catching up on all of these stories. And then the last story that we had was the story of Moses, right? It's getting warm here in Michigan, but it's not that warm in the morning. So I wanted to put my shawl on. And so we stopped here at the story of Moses, which was a very interesting story. And I've got kind of all kinds of things for you, like a timeline that I put together for you for today. And we'll even talk about what does that mean. You might not even know what a timeline is, but it's really interesting and you're going to really like it a lot because it's going to help us try and remember all of these stories. But we're going to slow down with the stories for just a minute. And the reason why is because the 10 Commandments are the first set of rules that we're getting. And even as young people, the one thing we like to know is we like to know what are the rules. If we play a game, we need to know what are the rules to that game. When we go to school and we do a project, what are the rules for that project? Even when we do homework, we look at the instructions and we read the instructions at the top of the page for the homework. Those are the rules for the homework. And so we're always following rules. And In fact, you might not know this, but kids, young people are very, the big word is rule oriented. But you're geared towards rules. You pay attention to rules. Because why? Why do young people pay attention to rules so much? Why do young people pay attention to rules so much? Like at 3 and 4 years of age, you guys are paying attention to rules. Why? Why do you think a 3 or 4-year-old cares about paying attention to rules? Why? Because they want to be good. That's why. Why do young children as early as 3 and 4 years of age pay attention to rules? They pay attention to rules because they want to be good. That's the reason why. They want people to tell them, good girl, or good boy, good job, good job. I'm going to tell you something I did this weekend, over Memorial Weekend. A lot of yard work. I was so tired every day. I was working so hard in the yard and I was so tired. But what happened was even though it got me so tired, it also felt so good. It felt so good to get so much work done. And you want to know what else I did? I planted my flowers is what I did. Some of my flowers, I planted some of my garden. The seeds I started months ago. My tomato plants are now this big. So I planted my tomato plants. And I want to show you them. I'm going to show you what I did this weekend is what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to show you what I did this weekend. So I'm going to put up a screen, but I'm going to keep talking to you, okay? So I'm going to put up our 10 Commandments screen. The only reason why I'm putting that up is because I'm going to walk through the house. And you don't need to be seeing everything in my house. Oh, shoot. My disc ejected. It didn't really eject. Okay. Oh, I got to start recording again. That wasn't supposed to be happening. There we go. Okay. All right. So I still have the volume on and I'm walking through the house for just a minute, and I'm going to just show you the backyard and what I did on the backyard. So, here, kitties, look at that. Look at this. Oh, my pillow fell down. Look at that. Look at that. Look at my beautiful pink blossoms there that are coming up. And see that right there? Those are sunflowers. And I think those sunflowers really needed to be out in the sun. Even though I had lights down there, I think they needed to be out in the sun. Let me put my pillow up here. And then, that's lettuce. That's my lettuce. I don't think it's going to make a very, it's going to make one big salad, maybe 2 medium-sized salads. But you can't believe how delicious that is right there. So that's my lettuce there. And this is broccoli. That's broccoli that I planted there. And then you can see all the other plants that I have there. And I even put the flowers out there on the beach, way out there on the beach that you could see. And the flower plants here. So not 100% all done. But I was also out mowing way down there is what I was mowing and getting, oh, you could see my plants over there too. Look at that. Look at how cute those are. Oh, and more plants underneath and more plants over here. Look at how pretty that is. So getting everything ready for springtime. And in fact, I was going to come out here and talk to you today a little bit outside, but it was so cool this morning outside. Actually, it's warming up now. I almost could bring everything out here and finish our class outside. So I'll start worrying about that a little bit later on. All right, let me put our little title back up while I walk back through the house. But the reason why I wanted to show you that and talk to you about that was because I wanted to tell you that I remember what God said after he got everything done, right? So what did God say after he got everything done? After he created everything? Do you remember that? After when it was the 6 days of creation or whatever. What did he say when he was all done? He said, it was good. He said it was good. Why did I just go through all that with you? All of that. What did it start with? It started with, what do we like? Why do we care about rules as young people? Why do we care about rules when we're young? That's where we started. And we care about it because we want to feel like we've done a good job. We want somebody to say, good job. And I was thinking about that as I was doing all the work outside. I was like, good job. Good job. It looks so good. You should see the lines in my grass from mowing. There, I only got part of it done because it's kind of a big lawn. And it's hard for me to do all by myself, right? But it looks so pretty. And when I was done mowing, I said, good job. And when I was done putting those flowers in the planters down by the beach, I said, good job. And when I brought all of those plants up from the basement where I had the lights on them and they were growing and my sunflowers were growing, I didn't show you my tomato plants and the other things I did. Maybe I'll show you those tomorrow that I put up front. And when I did those and finished those, I said, good job. I did. I really felt like it was a good job that I did. And even when I put those flowers outside on the table with all the other plants, I just brought these in here for you. But I had them on the table. That's all I did. I brought them outside and put them on the middle of the table. And you know what I said? I said, good job. That's what I said to myself in my own head. I said, good job. And I think, and then I thought about, does that sound like I'm being full of pride, right? Does it sound like I'm being prideful or arrogant? I'm not quite sure what the word is that you like to use, but does it sound like I'm bragging? Does it sound like I'm bragging when I say, good job, Annette? Does that sound like I'm bragging? And I don't think it is. And do you want to know why? Because I was thinking about what God would say and what God did say after he created everything, after he created and separated the light from the day. Remember those stories? Remember the stories, the Bible stories? Do you remember? And then he put the stars in the sky and he separated the land from the water and he made the plants and then he made the animals and he made man and woman on the same day. And what did he say? He said, good. It was good. He said, good job. That's what God said. He said, good job. That's what he said to himself. Good job. We like to know we're doing a good job. We really like to know we're doing a good job. And that's the reason why we like to follow rules. Now, when I put those plants out there on the beach, and when I put those sunflowers out there on the table outside, and I covered up some of the plants so that the sun wasn't getting them so much, wasn't burning them. Was I following rules? When I did all that, was I following rules? Sometimes. Some of them were. When I planted the seeds, I followed the rules on the package. And when I wanted to make sure that they had light down in the basement, I followed the rules for how much light they needed. And I followed the rules for how far down the seed should go. So sometimes I followed rules, sometimes I did. And when I followed the rules right and I got those little plants, I said, good job. But then there were other things I did, like I put the flowers out by the beach, right, in those pots. There were no rules. I saw that there was shade there, more shade, and I didn't want my flowers to die in the hot sun. It was so hot yesterday. Some of my flowers started wilting, so that's why I had to cover them up a little bit, right? So there were no rules for me to put those flowers down at the beach, right? There were no rules for me to take this vase of flowers and to go put that down on the table. There were no rules for that. But I still said good job. I thought it was a good job. So, do we have to follow rules to say good job? No, we don't. But that's where little ones start. That's where young people start. We start with rules. Why? Then we know we've done a good job. If I follow the rule, then I know I've done a good job. And it's very clearly important. It's important for us to know we've done a good job. It's important. It's important when we're little. It's important when we're medium size. And it's important when we're big. It's important. You've heard that people are feeling sad and sometimes depressed, right? You've heard that. Well, some of the reasons are because they didn't hear good job, or they didn't think good job like I did. Nobody was here. Nobody looked at that and said, good job, Annette. There was nobody here. I did it all by myself. Nobody said, good job, Annette, Dr. Annette. Nobody said that. I said it to myself. I had to say it to myself, and you know what? That's because it was a good job. If you saw that lawn mowed over there and how much work I did on that lawn, it was a good job. It was. And that's okay for us to say that, because sometimes there's not anybody around to tell us good job. And sometimes when we're little, when we're medium size, and we're big, or when we're big, it does make us feel better to say good job. It does. It does. If you learned your alphabet, good job. If you learned how to count, we're going to do some counting today for 10 commandments when we get to it, if we get to it. But we had to talk about this good job stuff. We did. This is very important to talk about good job stuff. Okay, but we do want to get some work done today as well. So, good job on talking about good job. Little people, medium-sized people, big people need to hear good job, even if we only say it to ourselves. But you know what? It has to be the truth. We can't just say good job when we didn't do a good job. I couldn't walk outside and look at my lawn and have my lawn look like, weeds up to here. My plants all died. I can't look at it and then go, good job. No beautiful flowers. All flowers are dead. They're dying. They die, right? They do. Of course they do. But still, good job, right? Good job. I got some new flowers. I enjoyed them. They're almost dead now. But I saved these. I saved the lilies, if you remember. So good job. So good job, right? So that's what we're doing. That's what I should have titled today. Today's title is Good Job. That's what it is. In fact, I was thinking about only talking about our theme this week and maybe not doing phonics. But I know some of you probably like phonics and probably need phonics. So I'm going to do phonics tomorrow. I am going to do phonics tomorrow. But today we haven't even started really what I have to talk about. So let's get on with what we have to talk about. And actually, you got to give me a sec. To focus on what I need to do here, which is pull up, because I didn't pull up our slideshow. We are on day 34. If you can even believe that. I cannot. Okay. And when we say day 34, it's like, yes, it's only a month or just over a month. We should have celebrated 30 days for our month, right? But that's not entirely true either, because actually we started on, if you can believe this, March 6th. So we are almost day 34 here. We actually are almost a whole month online. All right, let's do it. Isn't that nice? I was able to keep talking to you all the way through. So here we are, May 30th, day 34 of the classroom. And we always start with our tip number 6, although we always start pretty much with me jibber jabbering, right, about something. That's what we start with. But there is tip number 6. Don't forget, we are getting our tips, our grammar tips to improve our grammar skills from our 101 ways to improve your grammar skills. Right there. And tip number 6 is get your teacher's help. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing, because here I'm your teacher, and I am the teacher, by the way, not only a teacher, I'm the teacher. How do you get help from the teacher? Well, it's really actually easy. Don't forget that I've got let's get that up here, an email address. Let's see here. There we go. And the email address is Dr. Feravich, F as in Frank, ERA, V as in Victor, ICH, at healthymindbodyspirit.net, where I have all kinds of information about depression, anxiety, healthy mind, about nutrition, healthy body, and all kinds of things about a healthy spirit, including our classroom stuff right here. This classroom stuff that I'm giving to you helps your spirit. And you're like, well, what does that mean, Dr. Annette? I don't even know what that means. Well, think about it. Think about if somebody said, how's your spirit? And what we're here to do, what I'm here to do, is make your spirit healthy. So, tip number 6, get your teacher's help. I'm your teacher, and you can email me. And don't forget, you can email me and ask me for the worksheets, and then you're all prepared with the worksheets when we get together on Phonics Day. When's Phonics Day? When do we have Phonics? Every Wednesday. Wednesday is our Phonics Day, okay? And since I say every Wednesday, that means that I cannot renege on that and not be here with phonics on Wednesday. So even though we kind of are changing our theme just a little bit, we're going to take a little walk someplace a little different. We are following the storylines here. And here we're following these storylines. And where are we? We're with Moses. That's where we are. We're talking about Moses. And Moses brought us the 10 Commandments from God, of course, right? 10 Commandments from God. Moses gave us the 10 Commandments. So we're going to take a little detour. Why? Well, from the very beginning, what'd we say? Kids are rule-oriented. Young people are rule-oriented. So let's take a stop on the rules. That's what we're going to do. Take a stop on the rules. Okay. But this is the tip. That's a tip, not a rule. It's a tip. Tip number 6, get your teacher's help. Now, again, you can get my help, email me. All right. You can email me and you can get my help. And I would be happy, or put your comments below, because also that's a way that you could be the teacher. You could be the teacher. Put something below there that you want to share that's extra. That's the whole idea about how this classroom is going to work. Not even a little better, but a lot better than the regular classroom. For all kinds of reasons, I know it's going to work a lot better. Number 1, because you got the teacher. That's the reason why. That's part of the reason why. And I could say, that's good. She's a good teacher, and not be a braggart about it. No, it's all good. It's all good. Okay, get your teacher's help. So if you're in the classroom, sometimes it's hard to raise your hand and say something, isn't it? Now, I'm a lot older, but I still remember when it was hard to raise my hand. And since I've gone to school a lot, even though it gets easier for me to raise my hand, some classes I never raised my hand. Some classes I never raised my hand. Even as an adult in college, there were some classes where I never raised my hand. I was just too shy to talk in that class. For whatever reason, I was too shy to talk in that class. So I know what it feels like to feel shy and not want to talk in a class. I really, really do. But I'll also tell you what else I know. What else I know is this, is that when I did raise my hand, when I did ask a question, I was always better off because I did. I always learned more. You can't learn anything in your own mind. The only way you can learn something is from outside. Now, I'm not saying you can't have like a great idea. I don't know what that's called, actually. Yeah, what do we call that? Innovation is what it's called. Creativity. But it's called something else too. But it doesn't matter. So I guess, but it's not learning. Learning comes from outside of ourselves. So how do we learn? We have to listen to the teacher. We have to ask questions. And so I remember that even though there were lots of times where I didn't want to raise my hand, and I didn't. All the way through a class, I didn't. In college. Not a whole year in school. I was always jibber-jabbering in class because I knew everybody. We went to the same school for years and years. I knew everybody. We were jibber-jabbering in class all the time. But in college, there were classes I never raised my hand sometimes. Some classes. Not many. Some classes. And there were times where I wanted to raise my hand and didn't. And there were other times where I wanted to raise my hand and I did, but I was very scared because I thought everybody would make fun or think it was stupid what I said. So, but I was listening to what everybody said and I didn't agree with them. I was like, that sounds silly. That sounds kind of silly. I don't think that. And that made me not want to raise my hand even more. I was like, that sounds silly. I don't think I should say what I'm going to say because what I want to say is very different. And then I was like, that sounds so silly. That sounds silly. I don't agree. And so I did it. Went like this. And then he called on me because the teacher was waiting for the people who aren't speaking to raise their hand. And they'll call on you. So you better make sure if you even do this to know they're going to call on you because they're waiting for the person who doesn't speak up. They're looking. Those teachers are looking. Who doesn't talk? Let me see if they'll ever raise their hand. Oh, there's their hand. I'm going to call on them. And they'll call on you. Right away, they'll call on you. Right? And sometimes I was embarrassed. But not very often. Not very often. I was okay. And do you want to know what else I did? I practiced what I was going to say. I did. Before I raised my hand, I practiced what I was going to say. Even just the start of what I was going to say. well, I think, and I remember the conversation, it was about motivation. And he was like, we don't need to teach motivation. And I was like, well, I think. And everyone else was like, yeah, we don't need to teach motivation. And I was like, what? 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 I don't even understand what you're saying. And finally I went like this. And I was like, well, I think motivation is like exactly what we're all about and what we care about. And it was pretty good. Everyone else they were quiet. And then I felt like, oh, they totally disagree with me. I don't know. I thought it was good. I didn't say everything I wanted to say. I was really shy at that time, at that moment in time. I was kind of shy. So I didn't say everything I wanted to say, so it didn't come out as good as I wanted to. But it was a good idea. It was a good idea. And I just didn't have the courage to say the good idea. All right, where are we at? All right, so that's tip number 6. Get the help from a teacher, especially a good teacher that you really trust, that you know, that you like, a teacher that you like. Get help from a teacher that you like. Okay, what are we doing now? Running out of time. That's what we're doing now. Running out of time. Okay. What I want to do before we get to the 10 Commandments is I want to, so I didn't put these in the right order. I want to get to the questions that we have. All right? So, those pictures were supposed to be at the end. What do we have today? Today is the 10 Commandments. And what are we doing? We are doing review questions from the story of Moses. Why? Because the story of Moses is where we got the 10 Commandments from. And so let's review the things from our story, and then that will get us ready for talking about the 10 Commandments. So we're likely to be able to talk about the 10 Commandments more so on Thursday. Remember, tomorrow on Wednesday, we've got our phonics. So on Thursday, we're going to come back and talk more about the 10 Commandments. I'm not ready to go yet. But what we want to talk about right now is we want to review those questions. So let's take a look at those review questions. I'm going to open that back up again. But I'm going to close it up in a minute too, because what we want to do is I want to pull up the I'm looking at what I'm doing right now. I've got some things I want to do here. Pull up. There we go. Okay. So what I want to do here is I am going to be opening and closing that up as we look at the pictures. All right, but let's take a look at, because I want to look at the pictures too as well. All right, so our first question, where did the children of Israel live? What did they do? And what did Pharaoh command and why? All right, so where did the children of Israel live? They were now living in Egypt, if you remember. All right, so let's take a look at that. There's Jacob laying his head on the stone, remember? In Canaan. Remember that? And that's where they are returning back to. After Moses, they're returning back to the land of Canaan with the promises that Jacob was dreaming about when he laid his head on the stone called Bethel, which means the house of God. Remember that? Okay. And then we went to the story of Moses, right? So in those days, the children of Israel lived in Egypt. Right there it says. So they lived in Egypt, okay? If you remember. And so they lived in Egypt. What did they do? They were slaves, if you remember. What did the Pharaoh command? The Pharaoh commanded, if you remember, that the children, let me pull those questions up again. That all of the children that were 2 and younger be drowned, right? Why? because the Israelites were getting so large in size. Think about that. If the Israelites are slaves in Egypt, and there were 600,000 slaves from Egypt, 600,000 Israelites that were enslaved in Egypt, working for the Pharaoh, doing all kinds of work for the Pharaoh. Why? Because they were slaves. That's the reason why. They were building the pyramids that were in Egypt. I'm going to see if they've got pictures of the pyramids. I can't. No, they don't. Not here, but in the other one they do. And I'm going to pull that one up. So what were the slaves doing? What were the Israelites doing in Egypt? They were slaves there. And they were slaves there doing work for Pharaoh. And what was some of the work that they were doing? They were building the pyramids. Here's the picture of life in Egypt. I don't have my glasses on. But if you remember, even Joseph was in Egypt there as well. So that's inside the inside the Pharaoh's castle is what it would be. Here are, again, travels from Egypt and some of the paintings that were on the wall. Hieroglyphics, they call those. Egyptian paintings on the wall are called hieroglyphics. But I'm not seeing actually a picture of a pyramid, which seems so strange, since that's what the Egyptians, if you go to Egypt, that's what we're known for. That's what they're known for. But you can see here inside, what does this say? Oh, that's the staff of Pharaoh. But inside there, inside Pharaoh's castle right there, you could see pictures there of that a little bit, right? Here are the plagues of Egypt. Why don't I see? This is interesting, life in Canaan. So they go to Canaan. There's a picture of the 12 tribes here, which we also have a picture of the 12 tribes there as well. So as they move back into the land of Canaan, again, remember after Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, where were they? Jacob went to Joseph, and the 11 brothers went to Joseph where? In Egypt. Why? Because there was a famine and they needed food. Now what happens? Now, fast forward, they're all in Egypt enslaved. And what did Pharaoh command? That all the babies 2 and younger were drowned, right? Why? Because there were 600,000 slaves, and he was afraid that they would get to be too big, so they were drowning the male children, 2 years and younger, because otherwise they would become too powerful and they might overthrow the Egyptians, right? Kind of like what they did. Okay. What happened to baby Moses? What does the name Moses mean, and why was the baby named Moses? Moses was put in the basket, if you remember, right? By his mother, and his sister watched the basket float to the Egyptian princess, right? And she pulled it from the water. Retrieved from the water is what Moses means. And so that's the reason why Moses was named Moses, Because he was retrieved from the waters, right? All right. We're going to do one more, and then I have to get going because I have to get ready for our next class, the Bookless classroom. I've got a lot of work in that class to get organized for. Where did Moses grow up? Moses grew up in Egypt, right? He grew up in Egypt. What did he do there when he saw a Hebrew getting beaten by an Egyptian? He killed that Egyptian, is what he did, right? That Egyptian was beating that Hebrew, and Moses killed that Egyptian. What happened to Moses? Moses had to flee into the desert because the Pharaoh was going to kill Moses. Why? Because you can't kill an Egyptian. That's the reason why, especially for a slave. So Moses killed an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew. The Hebrew was a slave. The Hebrew is another name for an Israelite, right? We already talked about that, right? Or that's a Jewish person. That's a Jewish person. So a Hebrew is an Israelite who is also a Jewish person. Okay, this is Dr. Annette Feravich. We are here in the classroom. Thank you so much for joining me. And I will see you again tomorrow. And tomorrow, what are we doing? Tomorrow, we are going to be here for our phonics tomorrow. Okay? All right. So we'll continue with the rules on Thursday. I think that's the best way, even though I'm having fun and didn't get very far on the 10 Commandments today. We will be doing phonics tomorrow and pick this up again on Thursday. Thanks for joining me. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I'm the teacher. You're here in the classroom, the early bird classroom. Thanks again for joining me.